The greatest sports rivalries. Alabama versus Auburn, Iron Bowl. There may be no other series that more exemplifies all of these characteristics than Alabama versus Auburn, the Iron Bowl game. This is because the sport of football is packed with tradition, pageantry, loyalty, and passionate rivalries. You are either a Roll Tide or a War Eagle if you make your home in the state of Alabama. In the Iron Bowl, there is no room for compromise in the middle because if you are one, you are not the other. And there is no room for compromise in the middle. Or, for that matter, at any other opportunity. From the distant past to the present day, let's take a look at the history of the Iron Bowl. Auburn's past, matchups with Alabama. When approximately 5,000 people gathered at Lakeview Park in Birmingham, Alabama, on that chilly February day in 1893, they had no idea that they were seeing the first-ever meeting of one of the most notorious rivalries in the history of sports for the entire globe. During what was reportedly the first game of the 1893 season, Auburn defeated the Crimson Tide by a score of 32-22. This victory was a victory for Auburn. Alabama, on the other hand, argued that it was the final game of the 1892 season. Already from the beginning, there was a disagreement. 1907 was known as the Year of Ferocity. In that particular year, lawmakers initiated a discussion over the possibility of relocating the state's land-grant college from Auburn to Birmingham during a session of the state legislature. The motion was unsuccessful, but in the same year, the rivalry between the two football teams also became more intense, to such an extent that it came to a stop entirely and did not come back for more than 40 years or so. Throughout 2 generations, the schools, which were located on different ends of the state, stared at one another. A few hypotheses have been proposed to explain why this is the case. It is possible that the 1907 game was called off because there was an excessive amount of violence, both on and off the field, and that the series was called off for the sole purpose of maintaining calm. Another explanation is that Auburn coach Mike Donahue sought to break up the rivalry to express his disapproval of Alabama's offensive strategy during the games that took place in 1906 and 1907. Doc Pollard, the head coach of Alabama, engaged in what he referred to as military shifts during the game against Auburn in 2006. These were pre-snap motions in which every player, except the center, moved to produce an unbalanced line. Pollard installed the varsity two-step the next year, which was a similar configuration that infuriated Donahue to such an extent that he insisted that the game be officiated by a referee who was appointed from outside the South. Alabama did not agree. On the other hand, the underlying cause for the 41-year delay was most likely financial. It is $34 in total. There is a disagreement around $34. For the game that took place in 1907, the hotel allowance for each player, which consisted of 17 players on each team, was $2 per man, per day. This money included both the hotel and the meals. In 1908, Auburn team manager Thomas Bragg sent Alabama coach Doc Pollard a proposed contract that sought $3.50 per man, per day, for a total of 22 players throughout 2 nights. For 20 players, Bama's counteroffer was $3 per player, a debate that continued for such a long period that by the time any kind of settlement could be made, it was already time to set the 1908 football schedule. Auburn responded with a negative, which led to months of back and forth between the other school and Auburn. During that particular year, both parties made an effort to bring back the series. All that was required of them was to come up with a date. However, even at that point, Alabama and Auburn were not able to perceive things from the same perspective. An agreement was reached between Alabama and Auburn in September of that year over a compromise to the contract that Alabama had proposed. In exchange, Alabama agreed to meet the majority of Auburn's demands regarding the payment for players' lodging and food. All right, so everything is okay, right? Yes, but no. The Auburn Tigers offered 4 different dates for the game to pick from. 2 of those dates, however, had already passed before Alabama ever responded to them. This left only 2 dates, one of which was already scheduled to be played against Haskell Institute, and the other was scheduled to take place the Saturday following Thanksgiving. On the other hand, the Tide refused to move the Haskell game, and Auburn decided that it did not want to play football after the holiday season. That was the end of the Iron Bowl fight. It was over for good. That is what they believed, the activity of waiting. In the years that followed, Alabama developed into a dominant force in the national football scene. There were 3 championships won by the Crimson Tide under the leadership of Wallace Wade in 1925, 1926, and 1930. In addition, Frank Thomas won 2 more championships in 1934 and 1941, and Alabama went on to win 14 consecutive seasons. Donahue led Auburn to the top spot in the SECfootball in 1913, 1914, and 1919, a period during which the school experienced a moderate amount of success. It finished the 1913 season with a perfect record of 8-0, defeating teams by a combined total of 210 points. In 1914, Auburn finished with a perfect 8-0.1 record, including a scoreless tie against their rival Georgia, which they won. During his time at Auburn, Donahue ended with a record of 99-35-5. He left the school after the 1922 championship season. In the same period, Alabama finished with a record of 82-34-10. In 1948, the rivalry was reignited. 1923 was the year that Auburn turned away the opportunity to reignite the rivalry, and 1944 was the year that Alabama did the same thing. After the year 1944, the Alabama state government approved several resolutions to resume football competition between the 2 colleges. However, neither Auburn nor Alabama paid any heed to these motions. According to a well-known urban legend, Alabama was concerned that the state intended to remove public support from the school if Tennessee did not play Auburn. The pressure that was applied may have eventually resulted in a conversation between the presidents of Alabama and Auburn, John M. Galilee and Ralph B. Drofton, which led to the restoration of the Iron Bowl. It was decided by both teams that it would be most beneficial to play the game at a neutral location, and they chose Legion Field in Birmingham. Every year up until 1989, the schools would play their games at that location. In 1989, the tournament was moved to Auburn for the very first time. It was not until the year 2000 that Tuscaloosa played host to the game again, with Auburn claiming a 9-0 victory. It's the game. The game that took place in 1948 was a raucous and euphoric release valve for years of dissatisfaction from fans and alumni of both schools. It also heralded the beginning of a new age of football intensity that continues to this day. To allow fans of both teams to enter the stadium early and engage in yelling contests of Roll Tide and War Eagle at each other, the gates were unlocked several hours before the game was scheduled to begin. The marching band from Alabama orchestrated a UA and performed the state's battle song. Another AU configuration was used by Auburn after that. The national anthem was then performed by both bands simultaneously. After a wait of 41 years, Alabama and Auburn finally engaged in a football game against one another. Alabama prevailed with a score of 55-0, which remains the highest margin of victory in the series to this day. 2 touchdowns scored in the second quarter gave Alabama a 21-0 lead in the first half of the game. Clem Welsh was the recipient of Ed Salem's pass for a score of 20 yards and then again for a reverse of 6 yards. A touchdown run of 17 yards was scored by Salem to start the second half, and a pass of 53 yards was completed to Rebel Steiner. Before Don Spurrell recovered an interception from 20 yards out, Salem made a pass to Howard Pearson from 20 yards out, and Alabama blocked a punt for a touchdown. A total of 6 goals were scored by the Tide after the halftime break. The college football rivalry that was widely considered to be the most vicious, acrimonious, passionate, and enjoyable contest was here to stay. So, this is the end of our today's video. Do you like it? Kindly give your valuable response in our comment section below, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more interesting and informative videos.